Yeah.
Okay, so I kind of want to talk about just like how the week went, like the press conference that she was talking about. I think we found out we were going to be on that like the night before.
Yeah.
So we got to like, you be on this press conference, you have to talk for 5 minutes. But Tom was so good at guiding us. He would just like, all right, talk about this, and then you will connect with him like this, and it was just like this smooth process. So it was so stressful, but like so comforting to have this trust behind us. And like that's how the week went. Like, you're doing this in an hour, or do you want to do this interview right now? It's like, all right, let's do it. And that's just how the COP was. And like in the credentialed areas, you'd see like Amy Goodman was like right next to us where we would be eating lunch. You know, she'd be doing her show right there. And she mentioned David Banks, who's the he's the International Energy Secretary for the Trump administration. And I saw him surrounded by people in the hallway, and Amy Goodman's asking him questions. So I walk up and start recording. And then someone says, like, well, this organization represents 100 million people. What do you think about that? And he says, well, I represent 350 million people. Or something. And I said, no, you don't. And then he looked at me. He's like, yeah, I do. and then he kind of walked away. And then I showed Isabel, who just laughed about how kind of childish that was. Right? It was just a funny little moment. And then we were sitting there preparing for something else. And then I see him again, closer to us. So this time I walk up recording. I'm like, maybe I should ask him some questions. So the other reporter asked him like pretty standard, like, why is the Trump pulling out of the Paris Agreement, and just back and forth on that. So when I get an opportunity, I ask him, do you care about the next generation of people? And he's like, of course we do. And I'm like, well, why don't you invest in renewable energies and stop investing in like this fossilized economy of fossil fuels? And he gives a bunch of excuses of like, we don't have the technology, the transmission, the energy storage, and all that. And this guy Diego, who I connected with later, also a younger guy, and he had my back and just snaps back at him like, well, what about transferring the subsidies for the oil industry to the green technology, so we can get that technology that you're talking about? And he kind of BS's us, throws questions back at us to not answer the question. So then some other lady asked him a question, and then I asked him, well, what about getting oil money out of politics? And he's like, well, what do you mean about that? And I'm like, well, corruption is legal in the United States. And he laughs, and some reporters laugh. He's like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, corporations can give money to politicians. And he's like, you mean campaign finances? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh, well, that's not just a phenomenon in America. It's happening abroad. I'm like, we're talking about America, our country, where we're from. So he's kind of admitting that, yeah, we're corrupt, but so is everybody else. And I think he kind of like felt like he misspoke. So then he asked me like, well, can you give me an example of how the oil industry has corrupted the system? I just brought up the Dakota Access Pipeline. How Obama just let it play out when he knew it was against the law, it was wrong. And then the Trump administration tramples every law, every treaty, indigenous sovereignty. And Diego follows up. And then I end that with like, also, they use the police force as private security, shooting innocent people that were peacefully protesting. People almost lost their eye, their arms. And this is how the oil industry uses our government for their profit, for their bottom line. And at that point, he was like, oh man, this jet lag is hitting me, I gotta go. So that was pretty...
the jet lag.
So that was really funny, really amazing. And I got that on video if you guys want to see that.
Oh, yes.
And then I ran into Amy Goodman. I ran into Amy Goodman later, and I thanked her for challenging Jerry Brown on that keep it in the ground thing. She asked if he would apologize, and he said it was a joke. And then she said that was kind of like a Trumpian response, you know? And I mentioned to her, like, oh, I confronted David Banks, and to my surprise, I challenged him, you know, with difficult questions, but he was respectful the whole time. He didn't threaten my life. So what does that say about my progressive governor?
Yes.
You know? And she thought, like, yeah, that's a really good point. And then I also mentioned to her that I'm not really a Portuguese translator. So the interview we did together, if I wasn't so good at translating, I'm just filling in. And she's like, oh, okay. So that was really cool to talk to her about that. But that's how the COP was, like, politicians going through, you don't know who's who, like presidents of this country and indigenous people from all over the world, chiefs, and it was a really great environment to be in. Yeah.
I'm looking at the time. We have about a few more, like maybe like 15 more minutes. So I guess I'll just jump into, well, we can piggyback about what we gained from this experience and what we can bring to the table here for our group. So like we mentioned a lot, it was really intense. It was a full week, literally a full week for us, from sun up even past sundown. But we were able to make such powerful connections with IEN, It Takes Roots, CJA, GGJ, and all other people that were really there, and outside of our delegation. And the big thing that really stuck out to me while going out there was the social media team through Indigenous Rising Media. They stuck out because there was Brian Paras from Texas, Jade Begay, Joey Montoya. There's another woman, her name was Susie. And the way that they were, I mean, they were sort of isolated, but that was because they had such intense work to do, which consisted of press releases, getting in contact with different social media outlets, different journalists, and getting quotes from ourselves so that way, you know, they can write out blogs. And that just made me think about us, like, immediately, like, you know, that's something that would be great to have, you know, to have a small core of a social media team for Idle No More, rather than having, like, myself or Brianna be the main ones, and we're also, like, the MCs, or we'd have to speak, you know, because they were able to pull people aside and still at the same time be full of the information that we were talking about. They were really well educated about, especially Jade, like props to Jade, because she was just really on top of everything, on top of the organizations, on top of the names of people, of the actions that were set up. And that's something that would really benefit us when it comes to doing Facebook Live, creating short YouTube clips to be posted on our Idle No More page. So, you know, just a media team along with, yeah, I think that was it that really stuck out. And I think something for me, on a personal note, that I took back was wanting to, of course, learn more about carbon pricing and offsets and carbon trading, because this is really, really important stuff that's going on. And you know, there were days where I was just overwhelmed by the information, but it was much needed to know what's really happening outside of our small community and how directly connected we are to the global south, and also up in Canada too, how, you know, we're just making these friendships and relationships and seeing how we can build upon each other's problems and create, you know, something more sustainable with each other. And I just want to learn how to write a press release, and also learn more about knowing the facts, aside from you know, where I really speak, which is from the heart. So it's like balancing the two and being able to support, I guess, my judgment or my opinion. Yeah.
So we did like a lot of last minute action planning, and that was really hectic. But having their, like Dallas, having like their experience and their willingness to show that with us, made me think about us here, in that, it'd be good to have some sort of direct action training, because that would benefit a lot, because I've never done anything like that, and I think that would be really helpful. And I also want to bring back the knowledge of carbon trading, cap and trade, carbon pricing. So I want to perfect that in my head so I can share that with you all. So that's something I'm bringing back, to really focus on learning the ins and outs of California's cap and trade and the global carbon markets. Yeah, that's something personally I'm going to do. I'm also going to take Portuguese classes, because that's going to be extremely helpful. And personally, like, I'm really grateful for this opportunity, grateful for Idle No More for giving me this opportunity to really challenge myself, because I really had a fear of public speaking that I've been able to, I'm getting through. And that's been a real blessing for me. And a real main takeaway I also got from the COP was, we're up against a global system. And it's kind of daunting at times, especially we're just people here on the ground, But there are people around the world that are coming together, indigenous people building alliances across the world that will challenge this system. And I have a lot of hope coming from that.
Oh.
Wow, I think that's it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for going.
Yes.
Thank you for the report back.
Yes.
Wow.
So you're uncomfortable with public speaking, so you just start with the small stuff. White House correspondent.
Yeah, right, okay, well,
International stage. Once you can handle that, you can go on to the
I was there, so I gotta do it.